Welcome to our show today. My name is Ken Joelli. I'm the Natural Resources Extension Agent for the University of Florida, St. Lucie County Extension Office. And here at the University of Florida, we have many different programs available, from youth development and 4-H all the way to our Master Gardeners, and then we have the Florida Master Naturalist Program. We're going to spend time during our show today meeting two of our Florida Master Naturalists, two of the individuals that I help train, and I take a great deal of pride in the people I train, by the way. Richard Knott and Ellen Butler, who are two Florida Master Naturalists who have done different things with their time, with their expertise that they've learned about in the Master Naturalist Program. Richard is with mosquito control, and he's going to talk about what he does in mosquito control and maybe how the Master Naturalist Program helped improve your skill set there. And then Ellen is a volunteer, well, you're expert volunteer. You volunteer for the Extension Office, but Ellen also volunteers for the Smithsonian Marine Science Center, doing some work over there. So welcome, both of you. I've known both of you for a little while now, and we've kind of all gotten to know each other a little bit over the year or two.
Feels like longer than that.
No offense or anything, but it kind of does, doesn't it? And Richard and I have worked together for a very long time with mosquito control. But both of you come from the Master Naturalist Program, from different backgrounds and different subject areas, and you're both doing completely different things with your expertise that you've picked up in the Master Naturalist Program. And I think what we'll do is we'll start off with Richard first, and I've got a few questions for you about your expertise in mosquito control and maybe what you've done with the Master Naturalist Program. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do for mosquito control here in St. Lucie County.
Okay. I'm in charge of all the impoundments that mosquito control manages.
So what are those?
An impoundment in St. Lucie County is an area that has been separated from the ebb and flow of the tide of the river, of the Indian River Lagoon. We manage those during the breeding months to prevent the salt marsh mosquitoes and black salt marsh mosquitoes from breeding.
So basically you make it livable for people.
Yeah.
I think without mosquito control, we would have a very different way of life here.
It would be.
Yeah.
We have some photos, historical photos at the office that literally shows cows and other things from the early 1900s just suffocating from the amount of mosquitoes, just not being able to breathe. There were so many. So.
That's probably an issue that people just take for granted.
It is.
Yeah, but you guys are working very hard behind the scenes. So your time, you spent quite a bit of time in the Master Naturalist Program, studying with me and then my colleagues Ren Underwood and Amanda Thompson.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit about what you did with the Master Naturalist Program and maybe how it has helped you be a better mosquito control employee.
Right. As I mentioned, with the impoundments, I spend the majority of my time dealing in the Master Naturalist Program, a coastal system. A little bit of upland. We have some uplands in our impoundments in the middles of some of them, but mostly coastal. And it has changed, that coastal module has changed the way I look at the impoundments. And I've been doing this 20 years, and it completely changed the way I look at it.
So for people who maybe are not familiar with the University of Florida's Florida Master Naturalist Program, there are 3 core modules. We call them modules, but they're essentially core courses. And each of them are 40 hours long. And the students learn about the plants, animals, and the human interactions with the environment during those courses. And so the uplands, the freshwater, and coastal modules. And then we have a bunch of special topics that are basically advanced topics. But you don't have to take all those classes. So with you took the coastal course, and
Correct.
You benefited that way.
I did. And the uplands, even the uplands helped a lot. Freshwater, I mean, I don't deal a lot with freshwater, but the knowledge is the knowledge. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with it. So
It's interesting where mosquitoes can breed. Somebody told me that really all it takes is like a little soda cap full of water.
that's all it takes.
Yeah, and when you have like in the upland areas, you've got those beautiful oak trees that maybe have bromeliads and little tiny places where water can pool up.
That's right. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
That's all it takes.
So I think it's good that you've come to our courses and you've learned about maybe where some of those places those
It
little hiding
definitely
places
helps.
could
The
be?
understanding of the interaction between the different systems helps understand it a lot.
So you mentioned that mosquito control has helped make St. Lucie County livable, comfortable. We have a comfortable way of life here.
Correct.
For the residents and visitors. But it's more important than that, isn't it?
It is.
Mosquito control is more important than just comfort for people.
It is. It
There's
is.
a human health dimension to this.
Absolutely. And as we've learned in recent years, I mean, we're forever being threatened by existing diseases that we know is already in the environment and diseases coming into our environment from outside sources. So, and the majority of those in some way or another are related to mosquitoes. So, in particular species of mosquitoes. So understanding that species, that vector for that particular disease is paramount in keeping the public safe.
I have a public health pest control license. I could do some work, for you guys, but I'm better off on the education side. And it's interesting how difficult the biology of all the mosquitoes are. They're kind of like amphibians. They spend part of their lives in water and then part of their lives on land, which, it's not what I think about as an amphibian.
Actually, if you look at their whole lifespan, there's only, of the 4 stages of a lifespan, the only one of them is not in water.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they start out primarily as an amphibian type species. It's not till the end of their life, their maturity, that they turn into flyers.
So what methods does mosquito control employ to help keep those mosquitoes in control?
We have, of course, most people know about the fog trucks. They go out at night and do the fog truck missions.
But that's not the first thing. You guys are monitoring it.
Absolutely.
I see you brought something.
Yeah, I brought in some larvae. There's a few pupa in there, and there's larvae in there. But our mosquito control has inspectors. They will go out and find stuff like this, and that's how they know where to send the fog trucks at night.
So this other
That's how
little
they
dipper
catch
you
them.
have.
Yep.
So basically, when you guys you have employees going out
We do.
looking in swales and ditches,
Swells,
and
ditches,
ponds,
anything that holds water.
and then they take the scoop, and then they're going to collect a sample like what we just looked at.
Correct.
And then they can do a count of how much larvae is in there.
Correct.
And then they can employ a practice afterwards. So
Exactly. Well, if it's just an isolated event, they can treat it with some kind of a larvicide or something at that time. Or if it's an extended problem, they can send a fog truck out for a mission.
So I think with a lot of the mosquito control work, they monitor for the pest,
Yes.
accurately identify the pest, which is always the first step in pest control.
Always.
And I think they try to hit most of them in the water before they actually emerge out. where
We
they
try,
go.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can imagine, St. Lucie County is a big place,
Yeah.
so it don't always work that way. But that's the goal. That's the goal.
I worked a lot with Dr. Roxanne Connolly. She's since moved on. She's become a big
Yeah.
wig,
Yeah.
with nationally with mosquito
Yeah.
work. But she worked for the University of Florida, just north of us in Vero Beach.
Yes.
And I saw how she was trapping mosquitoes, and she would use dry ice.
Mm-hmm.
And I know why dry ice works, but could you explain why dry ice works in a trap?
It simulates the when a person or an animal or something exhales, that dry ice simulates that exhaling of breath. So the mosquito interprets that and hones in on it as a target.
So as the dry ice, it sublimates. It never turns to liquid.
Correct.
It turns from a hard substance right to gas. That's simulating a person's breath, and it's almost like a human person is there for it
Correct.
to feed
That's
on.
why most people notice most species of mosquitoes will target around your face and head because they're honing in on that exhaust breath.
So, what are the main diseases that we worry about the most?
Here recently, it's been dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. That's what's been in the news lately. That's what's been the hot topics.
It almost seems like we have a disease du jour, like
We do.
every year there's some new
We do.
terrible.
When I was getting started in mosquito control, it was the big 3, West Nile, St. Louis encephalitis, and Eastern equine encephalitis. They've kind of drifted to the background in recent years and been replaced almost in the forefront by the Aedes carrying diseases. 3.
Those are the invasive mosquitoes that.
Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti. Yeah, they're the container breeders. They breed right around people's homes. That's
So,
the ones.
speaking of that, what can people do to protect themselves?
Tip and toss. If you have bromeliads, please flush them out with water once a week. That is the leading cause of problems for us, is bromeliads planted in people's yards.
So they would flush it out by taking a hose?
Just a water hose and rinse the water out. They hold the water, take a water hose and rinse that water out once a week to keep the mosquitoes from developing in them pools of water. If you have dog dishes, dump them out. Bird baths, flush them out once a week, and they should be fine.
Yeah. So what can people do for personal protection? You know, so the yard, people can scan for
Sure.
the water in the yard.
Personal protection always is cover, and then anything with DEET in it is what we recommend.
Yeah.
Off anything that has a DEET component to it is a excellent repellent.
You know, people are always trying to come up with these home remedies, and to me it bothers me because
It
I
does
see
me
it.
too.
Yeah, I see it floating around. Sometimes I'll see it on Facebook where they have these home remedies. Somebody had like dog fennel in a jar of oil or something last year, and they were marketing it as a repellent, and a little scary there.
That scares me because I tend to lean towards the science of things, and DEET works. It's proven to work. So when you're trying to keep you and your family safe from disease, go with what you know works. That's my advice.
Go with the science.
That's it.
University of Florida, the Centers for Disease Control, they're pretty much on the same page with this
Correct.
stuff. So, and people, of course, are at risk when they deviate from that.
They are.
And when they
are.
start using these home remedies, and they get bit, and they could transmit diseases.
They could very easily.
So this is, you know, we talk about all the evils of mosquitoes, but are there any benefits to having them out
Sure.
there?
The only females that bite to draw blood meal are the females. The males are actually pollinators.
Okay.
So the males of the species actually help pollinate flowers, fruits, vegetables. So there is a benefit. Although limited, it's a benefit.
Yeah. Some of the mangroves that we have in our mosquito impoundments, when you look at the leaves, they have little nodules on them, and we suspect that we've been terming them vestigial nectaries.
Yeah.
So, you know, there might have been some sort of relationship between the mangroves and pollination and,
They could be.
and maybe mosquitoes.
That
So,
has been suggested in the past.
yeah, and that's all theoretically, 'cause, yeah,
Of
there's no way to
course,
test
yeah.
it. But, so, you know, a lot of work is going on in mosquito control with water. But, you know, so that's what you've done with your master naturalist work. You've kind of incorporated the new knowledge
Correct.
that you've learned through master naturalists into your mosquito control work. A lot of it dealing with water
Yes.
and those impoundments. But
Yes.
then we have Ellen also, who has decided to take a little different spin with this. And Ellen is volunteering her time and expertise in many different areas. But one of the things she does is she works with Lake Watch. And we see this array of stuff here. And this is basically her Lake Watch kit. So tell us a little bit about your volunteer work, Ellen, and what it is that you do for Lake Watch.
Okay. So after I took the Master Naturalist courses and became more and more interested in our local environment, you asked me if I would
I have a
like
way of doing that.
Yes.
Once you're my student, I never let you guys go, especially if you're good.
Yes, we talk about you. We still say once you get your claws into us, you never let go.
Yeah.
But you asked me if I'd be interested in helping out with Lake Watch, which is a citizen science project where volunteers go out to specific bodies of water and regularly collect water samples for testing and test clarity of water while they're out there. So it's really pretty interesting to me to get assigned to a body of water and be able to look at it over time and see what's happening with it. So what I'm doing is kind of benefiting other people who may need that data to do ongoing study of our water bodies. And I believe that the program, Lake Watch, I think we have about 85 bodies of water. Well, in my report, my water body is indexed against 85 other bodies of water.
Yeah, what they do is they
Is that regional? That might
yeah,
be
they
regional.
compare it to others in the region there. So,
Yeah.
why is water quality important to you?
Well, we When I first moved to Florida, I'm not a Florida native, I'm from Chicago. And of course, when you live in Chicago, you're living on the Great Lakes, which represent 20% of the world's fresh water supply. And so when you're in Chicago, you don't worry too much about where your drinking water, your fresh water is going to come from. But when you live in Florida, you do worry about it. You worry about we have all kinds of water issues, from pollution in the oceans affecting our coral reefs to the discharges from Lake Okeechobee affecting the Indian River Lagoon. And so I wanted to participate in a small way to help to a better understanding of what's going on in our local freshwater.
And from a UF faculty member point of view, citizen engagement, my whole job is citizen engagement. And working with people like you and Richard in the field, that's the most satisfying part of my job. I couldn't do my job if it wasn't for you guys being involved in it. So currently you're over at the Savannahs on Midway Road.
Right, the county recreational area part of the Savannahs.
Okay. Savannahs, by the way, is that really thin strip of water. Most people who live in St. Lucie County have traveled over it or in it at one point or another. Even if you're north near Vero Beach, by the Indian River County line, there's the Indio Savannahs.
Indio Savannahs,
Yeah,
right.
and that's kind of been broken up by some roadways and things, but there are pipes connecting all of it. And then it goes all the way down to Jensen Beach,
That's right.
which is, and the tip of it is in Martin County.
That's right. And there's a
So-
state park over there that you can use to access Savannahs.
Yeah. So it's a pretty long and I would say pretty vital body of fresh water. And I would term it ephemeral because it does dry up part of the year.
It does change during the course of the year. In the wintertime, you're going to see a lot more water. It does dry up, but you actually can see the water because the vegetation growth is down. And then in the spring and the summer, you just get these blooms of vegetation in the water, aquatic plants as well as algae. So
Every time I go to Savannah's, whether it's at Midway Road or down in Port St. Lucie off of Walton Road, I always bring my camera because there's always something to take a picture of, whether it's water birds or flowers.
or alligators.
Alligators.
Yeah.
Some of us actually, kind of get into monitoring algae and stuff too. We're kind of,
Yeah.
that's the way we are. But so you've brought some stuff here. So could you talk a little bit about the process that you go through as a Lake Watch volunteer?
Sure. Well, so first of all, to actually do Lake Watch volunteering, you have to have access to some sort of boat to get you out onto the water. I think ideally like a nice flats boat or a john boat would be good, but I kayak, so I take my kayak out there. And when I'm out there, I do I actually do 2 kinds of water sampling and then one water clarity test. So the things that we do is we take some milk jugs or some empty plastic jugs, and we collect water and I collect at 3 different sites in Savannahs. And those are the same sites every time we go out. And so we collect water to do some filtering with later, and we also use these small containers, and we take a sample of water at each site in this small container, and then we mark the date and the water body and some other information, and that goes to UF. And so other people are doing more detailed tests on this water. We also use a Secchi disc, and this is a Secchi disc. This is kind of hard to see, but
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff
we've
on the
got a lot
table.
of stuff on the table. But this Secchi disc is connected to a line that is marked at, I think this one's marked at every foot. And so what happens with that Secchi disc is that it is lowered into the water to take 2 readings. One is at each site, how deep is the water overall? And then the second reading is, at what point in lowering that Secchi disc does it disappear? And that is a measure of the water clarity.
So I see that there is a weight on the bottom of this, and that just helps it get all the way down, doesn't
Yep, it
it?
goes all the way to the bottom. Savannah's recreational area isn't very deep, so
Yeah.
it doesn't have to go too far. But it does disappear pretty easily. It's easy to see when it disappears. You just lose complete sight of it. And we also collect what the weather conditions are that day. So are we in bright sun? Is the water rough? what's the wind doing, things like that. So we also take some of those readings because they could impact the kind of other readings we're getting. If it's windy, it could stir up sediment. If it's cloudy or overcast, it might impact how we're reading the SecuDisc.
And you mentioned the cloudiness and even temperature and all that. So when we have these bottles like this, you're covering them or you're putting them in a cooler.
Yeah, as soon as you start collecting water, the heat and the sun can actually cause reactions to whatever is in the water in the bottle. I use black filter bags to actually store all my water samples in until I get back to land and I start doing my filtering. So I'll put them in a cooler or put them in a black filter bag so the sun doesn't do whatever it's doesn't cause more reaction to be happening with the things in the bag.
Algae photosynthesizes, producing, so the sunlight on the algae can produce oxygen.
That's
and
right.
Throw the readings off and all.
Can, yes.
So you'll have water in your milk jug, and then you've got a graduated cylinder right there.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do when I get back and kind of clean up my area, is I'm going to take some of my water sample that's in these plastic jugs. I'm going to use my graduated cylinder to measure it out for each site. I'm going to keep track of how much water I am then going to filter, because what I want to do is I'm collecting a sample. I think this is the way we're doing our chlorophyll test.
Yes.
Basically, what we're doing is we take a filter, and we try to keep everything really clean, a really clean filter. This is a filter, and that filter is placed on top of this filter, where we have our container. This is actually I want one
It's a
of these.
magnet.
These are
Just kind of
magnetic. Mine screws on.
I
so-
think I'll give you that one.
And then what we do is we are very careful to have our correct amount of water. Let's say it's 500 milliliters. I usually you do 250 at a time.
Okay.
So I'll put 250 milliliters of water in here. I'll transfer it to this container, and then we use this is a hand vacuum pump, which draws the water through the filter. So what we're doing is we're collecting chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is the green pigment that you get from aquatic plants and algae and cyanobacteria that are in the water. And that filter is then, as soon as it starts changing color, and we have gotten to whatever water limit we're using, we'll carefully store that in a little filter container, a little filter envelope, and that also gets put in some desiccant and sent in for testing.
So then you'll have data that you record. So every time you go out, you might be using a different amount of water.
I might be, yes.
So maybe in the summertime, if there's a lot of sunlight out, maybe a little more algae in the water.
Right. So one of the things that happens, and it sort of makes sense, is the more chlorophyll in the water, the quicker it collects on that filter, and it gets so thick that you can't even pump any more water through the filter.
Okay.
So you are going to not necessarily always use the same amount of water. When there's less chlorophyll in the water, you may have to do 500 milliliters or 750 milliliters to actually even get anything collecting on the filter.
I've worked with some of the other Master Naturalist Lake Watch volunteers, and they never got a color change.
That's possible.
Yeah,
if the water is
water's
pretty
so clear.
clear. Yeah, if the water's clear, it's possible.
Yeah. So then you've got this filter paper, and you put it inside this container is some desiccant.
Right.
That just basically dries it out and keeps
That's
it
right.
dry.
Dries it out and keeps it stable.
And you're making sure you're not touching that.
Don't touch it. There's actually a little protective envelope. You put it in carefully, fold it over. Yes, it's very tricky, particularly when you're doing it outside and it's windy. You have to be really careful. It's wet. Everything's wet, yeah.
Yeah. So, wearing some clothes you don't mind getting soaked on a day like that.
That's right. That's right. I did improve the process a little for you, which is that
I would expect nothing
yeah,
less.
Of course. The forms that we used to collect data when you're out on the boat, they're just pieces of paper and you have a clipboard, but everything is so wet that what I decided to do was laminate those, and I use permanent marker and an alcohol pen to reuse the data collection sheet on the boat over and over, and then transfer that data to the regular paper copy that goes to UF. I'm going to actually make copies for everyone at Lake Watch. So
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool. So, are you seeing any trends at your site?
I've only been out data collecting 3 times for you. And I don't think I've seen any trends. I'm seeing the normal seasonal changes that we get in the summer when we have heavy rains. I actually had a woman say something very interesting to me, and it just really outlined why it's so important to educate people about freshwater systems and aquatic plants and water quality. And she said, oh, the summer's so hard for me because the lake disappears and gets all choked with all this vegetation.
Oh, that's all the stuff that we need.
And I said, that's a really good thing. You know, these native aquatic plants that we have, they're filtering the water. So the nitrogen, that can sometimes be a bad thing because it can cause an algal bloom, is also providing food for these great aquatic plants that are in turn pulling other pollutants out of the water. So seeing all that growth along the shoreline and in the middle of the lake is a really fabulous thing. And so she got it after I talked to her about
You know,
that.
it's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up with that person because there are two elements, the nitrogen and phosphorus, which are limiting elements for
Right.
algal blooms.
Right.
So when you have too much nitrogen, urea, things like that, too much phosphorus. In Florida, we have a lot of phosphorus
Right.
naturally occurring. So when that stuff is out there, we're likely to have algae. We could do a
That's
whole
right.
show on just on algae. But so
Well, I will tell you, the 3 last samplings that I've done, and I'm due to go out next week. I try to go, by the way, every 2 months. I have not seen at Savannah's rec area, I have not seen like out of control algal blooms.
Yeah.
I have seen some invasives. There is some hydrilla out there and water lettuce, but I have not seen the type of algal blooms that you can see choking a freshwater lake. I have not seen that there.
I think we're very fortunate because I see all the data that comes through and it gets interpreted by Lake Watch and I see the reports. And that water in the Savannahs is pretty clean.
Yeah, it's pretty clean.
Yeah, it's good to know. So, well, I wanted to thank both of you for being on the show. Richard, are there any last minute things you'd like to talk about? Maybe what you'd like to do in the future with mosquito control or the Master Naturalist program?
No, I just want to see us keep moving forward, you know.
Yeah.
The impoundments is a great program. We get to do mosquito control naturally with minimal chemical interference. So that's what I want to see progress.
Keeping nature healthy. Yeah. And Ellen?
I think I'd like to keep doing the sampling, and I'd like to get a little bit more into the data.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see you're a number
I've already
cruncher.
been looking at my report, and I have some questions. So,
You know, the nice thing from an instructor's point of view, and I see this with Amanda and Ren also, interacting with the Master Naturalists. We've got hundreds of Master Naturalists. Almost 500 Master Naturalists have graduated out of our program in St. Lucie County over the years. I think it's like 2001 is when I got my instructor certification. But it's been so rewarding because when you look at communities that don't have Master Naturalist programs versus communities that do, we have some really informed citizens here.
yes, I think
And they
that's
use
true.
science and not, belief in science is different.
Correct.
And it's always good to go back to the science and what the data shows and what's true rather than what the belief is, what we think, because we need to have numbers.
That's
So,
it.
well, I want to thank both of you once again for being, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you guys over the years. And Ellen and Richard, we'll work together. I'm not going anywhere. So here at the University of Florida, St. Lucie County Extension, we have a number of Master Naturalists working on projects throughout the community. If you need to reach us, it's at 772-462-1660. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.